It's important to go over the steps to creating a spending plan. Step 1, track current income and expenses. 2, personalize spending plans. 3, allocate money to each category. 4, implement and control. And then 5, evaluate and make adjustments. I've highlighted number 5 in orange so that students understand that that is really the most important step. Once you create a budget, you need to continually revisit it, make adjustments, because life happens, and your budget, as well as you can possibly plan it, will need to change. And that's just a fact of life. But that concept is often hard for students to understand, because they think once they do something, it's done, should be perfect. But it's not. Budgets are this fluid document that's always changing. It's important to give students sort of a guide as to where they should budget their money. This pie chart provides a guide for typical percentages of income spent in each expense category. So for example, 30% of your income should go to housing, 20% to transportation, 15% to food, and so on. This is a good opportunity to also have a discussion with your students on what variables may cause these percentages to be different. For example, housing. Depending on where you live, housing costs could be considerably more than 30% of a person's income. Same with food or transportation. It's a really good opportunity to talk about transportation, especially, that this number can go up or down depending on where you live and how far away you live from your work or your employment. Creating actual budgets in class is a really important part of the budget unit. Students really learn from this hands-on approach, and they need a template to get started with, because if you ask them to create a budget from scratch, it's just too overwhelming. They don't know if they're doing it right, they don't know if they're doing it wrong, and ultimately, it's not about creating the template, it's about actually creating a budget. So give them something to start with, a guide. Practice makes perfect. Have them create at least 3 budgets over the entire unit, if not more. Each budget should progressively advance in complexity. Use scenarios, simulations, and you can also have them create a budget for after high school or college, which we'll talk a little bit more about. There's all different types of spending plan and budget formats. This one's a little complex. This is very similar to an income and expense statement, except we have an added column with the planned amount. Take Charge Today has separate lessons on income and expense statements geared for 10th through 12th graders if you wanted to explore income and expense statements as well as budgeting. But this budget format has payroll deductions down here as part of their expenses. So make sure if you use a budget like this that you've covered paycheck deductions already in class. For some students, this may be a really simple budget to follow, and for others, it may be a little complex. Be sure to use what works for you. If this seems a little overwhelming to your students, you can start with a simpler budget like this one. This one focuses on fixed versus variable expenses. So make sure you cover the difference between fixed and variable. Again, this one has taxes withheld up here and your take-home pay, and the vocabulary is a little bit simpler. At the bottom, instead of net gain, net loss, we have over, short, which is sometimes easier for students to understand. Here's another type of budget. This one focuses more on detailed categories. So for example, transportation has car payment, insurance, maintenance, and gas. Food has groceries and dining out. So it's taking categories and breaking them down significantly, which can be really important. And I want to spend a moment to talk about sort of the bottom of the budget, the net gain or the net loss. We all know that income minus expenses equals net gain or net loss. If you have a gain, what do you do with all that money that's left at the bottom of your budget? You need to add it back to your savings or towards another expense, like a debt or credit card debt. What if at the bottom of your budget it's negative? You don't have enough money to make it through the month, for example. So you have to either increase your income or decrease your expenses, or both. This is really, really important that you spend a lot of time having students understand the bottom of the budget. They need to understand that it's a balancing act, that the sides must be equal, expenses and earnings. You can't spend more than you earn, and you can't be negative. So at the bottom of your budget, anything left over needs to go into your savings account. And if it's a negative number at the bottom of your budget, you need to go back through and readjust. That takes a while for students to understand, so be patient. If you haven't already covered savings as a unit in your financial education course, I recommend that you do it right after budgeting, if not right before. When you talk about savings, we want to talk about pay yourself first. And for some, this can actually be a line item in their budget. The idea, of course, with pay yourself first is whenever you receive money, immediately put a certain amount aside to later meet a short-term or long-term goal. The idea is out of sight, out of mind. You pay yourself first. I like to tell students to put it into a direct deposit savings account or some other sort of liquid account. The recommended 5 to 10% of your net income should go to savings, and you should have at least 3 to 6 months worth of expenses for emergencies. So it's important that you've either covered this before or right after budgeting, so they understand the value of savings and they know how important it is to have that line item in their physical, actual budget. It's also advised to talk about how are you going to control your budget? How are you going to create it and manage it? There's lots of computer software programs that do it. You can also find web-based spending plans. Banks will have budgeting programs. You can show students the old check register system where they do it on paper. And then there's also a theory on using the envelopes where you put money into an envelope, and each envelope represents a category of spending. For example, gas or food or dining out. Each of those is its own separate envelope, and you put the allocated amount of money into that. But of course, in today's world, the envelope system does seem a little outdated because many places really don't want you to use cash anymore. There's lots of tracking, spending, and sort of budgeting programs available online. Some have apps for the phone, lots of free websites, including pairbudget.com. This one's super simple and easy for students to use. Mint.com. Also make sure that you tell them that they can use Office 365, which is free online, and Google Sheets will also allow you to create budgets. This can be a great exercise, a great research project for your class to have students look at apps and websites that do budgeting. There's so many out there. So be sure to reinforce some basic concepts. That a spending plan or budget is a very important financial planning tool. It's almost a necessity. Remember to reinforce that having a budget or spending plan will allow students to achieve their goals. And that your spending plan needs to work for you. Don't create a spending plan that's impossible to achieve. Make sure to control, evaluate, and adjust your spending plan. Again, number 5, step 5 here, evaluate and make adjustments, is a really hard concept for students to sort of grasp. That this is a fluid document. There's no right or wrong way, ultimately, to create a budget. It's always being modified and changed and updated.